I'm Ashley Pickle. That's Greg Powers, and this is This Week
in Cruton.
It's This Week in Recruiting. It doesn't matter if we're in studio, out of studio. The Cruton is still there. Am I right?
It's an awesome time of year for Cruton. No doubt. The Cruton's always going on.
Cruton does not stop. And you know what else doesn't stop? Our proud partners, our proud sponsors of this segment, Chicken Express. They're always there. Just like Cruton, it doesn't stop.
I know, and it's the perfect week to go get you some Chicken Express. If it's New Year's Eve, get your party started right. You want to get some extra padding in your belly so you can go out drinking. Chicken Express is a good lunch to have. It's Friday this year, so everybody has to be ready.
You're not wrong. And you're probably tired of cooking at this point. Like, you're tired of cooking an exponential amount for the family. So this works out perfectly for literally everyone in every stretch of the way.
No doubt.
All right, it is This Week in Recruiting, brought to you by Chicken Express. Let's go ahead and get right on to it. It's the prospect on the rise. This one, Stephenville wide receiver Coy Aiken. If you haven't heard of him before, well, you have probably heard of him now. This guy put on a literal clinic. I'm talking like my dad was at the state championship games, and he texted me in the middle of it and said, "Why haven't I heard of this guy before?" And I was like, welcome to the greatness. Coy Aiken, it has been, he was unbelievable.
Well, I'm glad that we get to talk a little bit of state championships this week because we had the week off last week following the state championship games. And there were a couple of prospects in the notebook this week, and really things have blown up for Coy since the state championship game. His offer list is completely flipped upside down. You know, he came into that game with some smaller offers. I would look at his list and say, you know, he had some schools like UIW, I think was a pretty good offer for him, Lamar at that time. But now, fast forward the clock just a couple of weeks, he's got Western Kentucky, Sam Houston, Texas State, North Texas, Arkansas State, and his first big-time P5 offer from Washington State just came in. So his list is looking a little bit stronger, I would say, heading into what would be the second national signing day here at the beginning of February. And he's going to have to make some tough choices, but now he's going to have to be able to kick back and take some official visits and possibly check out some of these big schools that are now coming after him. Maybe we'll see a few more, but things have to be really exciting in the Aiken family right now as they're able to see all this opportunity flow in for him. I like him as a guy who could play on either side of the football too. I mean, we saw all year what he could do on both sides of the football, leading Stephenville to a state championship game. And I think that he has the length and size to be a center field style free safety, but he also shows great hands and concentration to go up and make tremendous catches over the top of defensive backs. So whatever side of the ball he ends up on, I think a school's going to be not only getting a guy who has playmaking skills, but that is a guy that also works hard and loves his football team. I think that really came through. Talking to him after the game, seeing him win that MVP award, he loves his teammates, and I think that he'll bring that to the table in college.
And I think that came to light exponentially when he had the play where LBJ had fumbled the ball or threw an interception, and he went over there after being the receiver that had missed the pass and punched it out to be able to get his team to score a touchdown in that state championship game. And I think that that's what stuck through most to me, was the fact I had seen him play earlier on in the year, and it was one of those things where he was a guy that you were like, okay, he's got a lot of talent that I didn't realize necessarily that he had. On top of that, when you add that passion and that drive and everything, then it's like, man, this guy's the full package.
It's really nice getting to watch Texas high school football, I think, week in and week out. You take it for granted sometimes, right? You know, there's a guy like this sitting on Stephenville's roster. A lot of people overlooked him all year long, and it's really nice to be able to see that he's now getting appreciated for those efforts. But for every Coy Aiken, there's another 5 who's not getting the same attention, and that's just what we're blessed to watch every week when we, go watch a game under the Friday night light.
You're not wrong at all. Let's go ahead and move on to our commit of the week. This one out of the 210 area, Converse Judson defensive tackle Johnny Bowens. And this seems like a tale as old as time almost. He had 2 schools he was deciding between, and that was Texas A&M and Texas. And he committed Texas A&M on Christmas Day, so he picked the Aggies over Texas, and a guy that, at 6'3", 270, a hoss.
Yeah, no doubt. And he has experience playing multiple positions up front. I like his overall projection as a defensive tackle, but, he could be that strong side defensive end in a 3-4 as well. And he plays for the same high school as Texas A&M's stud, DeMarvin Leal. So there's a connection there, and he's the next great one coming through that pipeline. Very explosive, knows how to use his hands, but he can really overpower offensive linemen or overwhelm them at the point of attack. And he has a quick first step for a big fella. So he's able to get off the line quickly and make things happen. Really just causes problems up front a lot. And I think he has an extremely high upside too. He's already a DCTF 4-star, but he's one of these guys who we could be looking at making a huge rise as we get some more tape on him, get to see him maybe possibly in some camps this upcoming spring. Converse Judson had a little bit of a down year, but don't take anything away from their talent. They've got plenty of talent on that roster.
Moving on now to our underclassmen of the week. Again, this week in recruiting with Next Level Athletes, Greg Powers. Let's move on to our underclassmen of the week. And this one, how about Franklin 2023 athlete Bryson Washington? And I've got to tell you, so Ish Malpal and I were all at the state semifinal game between Franklin and Wascom, which was a beautiful clash in styles. We were like, this one's going to be over in an hour and a half. I mean, super quick game here. And Bryson Washington absolutely lit it up. You get to the state championship game and you see Malik Murphy and you're thinking, okay, wow, they've got a stud. But Bryson Washington is one of those guys that has unbelievable explosive play power, and one that if you paid attention to him any other time other than that state championship game, you're going to say, that's a kid who can play some football.
Bryson Washington is a guy who caught my eye during the state 7-on-7 tournament back in College Station in July or late June. Really athletic guy. What I thought at that time is I really don't know what position he's going to play in college. And I think maybe some colleges were thinking the same thing. And that's why I don't think his offer list really popped off, really as early as some other guys, because he's uber talented. But go to the state championship game, and he not only dominated on the offensive side of the football, keep in mind, he was probably going to be the player of the game until Murphy went off at the very end and scored a couple long touchdowns and cemented MVP honors. But he also was a warrior on the defensive side of the ball. This guy never left the field, right? He was always on the field making plays, no matter whether it was on offense or defense. I always kind of thought he was going to be a safety. That was kind of my projection for him. He's right at that 6-foot marker, maybe 5'11", 6 foot, 190, 195 pounds. So, the question was, does he have the length to be a safety? Well, guess what? It really doesn't matter. This dude can play, and he does have the length. He's got long arms. He gets to the football quickly. And I don't even know if safety's his best spot now. I mean, he just slides off of arm tackles and makes big plays, very shifty in the open field, has good feet, can make tacklers miss in space. But either side of the football, he's going to get offers on both sides. He's going to have to make a decision. Does he want to play offense or does he want to play defense? He told me after the game that he prefers defense, but a lot of schools are now looking at him on the offensive side of the ball, and he just doesn't care. He just wants to play in college, and now he's going to have that opportunity with schools like UTSA, Iowa State, North Texas offering since the state championship game's final whistle blew.
And that's really interesting to me because watching him, obviously, you look at Franklin and you see them run that slot T offense, and that's not something that you'll see in college. You can see the triple option, I guess, if you go to Army. But other than that, it's kind of a wide open realm there. And so that was something that we were wondering the whole time that we were watching. We're like, we can tell how talented this kid is, but which position does he fit best in, considering he is basically just Mr. Explosive when it comes to high school offenses?
I got an answer for you, Pickle. We're going to take the easy way out. We're going to list him as an athlete.
My guy, ATH. That's the problem, or the solution to all of our problems. We love to see it. And finally, moving on down to our recruit of the week. This one, not a state championship team, just a darn good athlete. Arlington Bowie offensive guard Devin Campbell. He recently announced, again, as we said, a tale as old as time. He's coming down to two schools here. This one, the Red River rivalry in between Texas and Oklahoma. And you've got to think, if you've got offer from both of those schools and those are your last two, probably pretty stinking good at football.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be a good battle. I give the edge to Texas right now. He's the number one rated offensive guard in the state. This is a huge recruitment for Texas. They've been high on his list for a really long time, but I have to say that OU has a really good track record in the city of Arlington to go down into the south of DFW and grab some of the top players. So it'll be really interesting to see what he decides on February 3rd. That's the date that he has, penciled in to make his decision. Campbell's one of 24 players who's playing in the Under Armour All-American game on January 2nd. And if you're a Texas high school football fan, that's a game that you have to watch. I think Texas has about 5 commitments in it. I think I counted 9 Texas A&M commitments from the state of Texas. So it's going to be a loaded game for Texas high school football. And Harold Perkins, the most highly coveted, uncommitted prospect, going to be making his decision in that game, picking between Texas, Texas A&M, and LSU. And I give the Aggies the edge in that recruitment right now. So we'll say 1 for Texas, Devin Campbell. That's what we're thinking, and possibly 1 for Texas A&M and Harold Perkins, maybe announcing in the Under Armour All-American game. So it'll be a lot of fun this week as we start to put a ribbon on the 2022 class and start to turn our focus to 2023. But there's still some big time recruits left undecided.
And I would be remiss at that point if I didn't ask you. I mean, we haven't really been able to talk a whole lot of recruiting since that early signing day happened on the same day as the state championships, that first Wednesday. So when you're taking a look back at some of those recruits that really signed on the 15th, what did you see and are able to say that's a really big pickup for a couple of these schools?
Well, first off, you have to look at Texas and Texas A&M. Well, Texas A&M, will start with them. They signed the number 1 class in the entire country. That's saying something. Then they added Denver Harris to it, the number 1 player in the DCTF Rising cover boy, as like the cherry on top. They're a main player for Harold Perkins, as we just talked about. He's making his decision in the Under Armour game. I think that they'll get him, so just adding a little bit more to that. What they did on the defensive front was not only the guys that they were able to sign from in-state, but some of the guys that they signed from out of state. They signed a big defensive tackle from Florida. They signed one from Tennessee, who's the number 1 defensive lineman in the country. They have really reloaded up front, and I think that's really impressive. And on Texas, who probably is the number 2 team in the state, well, not probably, they're clearly the number 2 team in the state. They did a really good job closing strong. They got some really good talent coming in the pipeline there for Steve Sarkisian. And I really like the fact that they were able to get Kelvin Banks, 5-star offensive tackle, coming down the stretch. They were able to close strong and sign guys like Terrence Brooks, who was committed to Ohio State at one point, actually made his decision on the first day of the early signing period to flip from Ohio State to Texas. And they have guys coming in like Brian Allen, Jadon Blue, and Brennan Thompson, who are all really, bright Texas high school football stars. So Texas did a really good job as well. I think they finished off at number 5. So when you have the number 1 team in the country and the number 5 team in the country, both in state, I think that the futures are bright with both of those programs.
And I'm just going to straight up put you on the spot here because that's what we do around these parts and you're an expert here. So were there any commitments that necessarily kind of surprised you at all for that early signing period?
Well, one that I didn't know about or kind of caught me off guard was Texas Tech was able to land a commitment from Landon Hollaby, 4-star cornerback. Joey McGuire did a really good job out of the gates getting some good players on Texas Tech's commitment list, but this was like, kind of like that guy. He was a DCTF 4-star wire to wire. His brother, he has the lineage, right? His brother plays at Texas. He has football runs in his family, so I think he gets it. I think that was probably going to be, one of the ones that kind of just came out of nowhere for me. I really didn't expect that one. And really, when you look at some of the other classes, I think this isn't going to be necessarily talking about like which guy signed with which program. I was a little bit surprised that top to bottom, after you get outside of Texas A&M, that there just weren't as many signings with all the rest of the programs. I think that when I added it up on the first day of the early signing period, if you added up the bottom 5 classes in the state of Texas, I think that they only had 24 or 25 signees, which is typically one full class. So there weren't as many signees. So I'm really interested to see what now happens from now until, the February signing day. Is that rectified, or are these schools really going to be that serious in the transfer portal to make a difference on their roster? You know, everybody wants that immediate player that can come in and change their team right away. But I'm seriously curious about how this is going to affect rosters 3 or 4 years down the line. Will they have the depth, and has college football now changed completely to where we don't, you know, really, you know, if you're worried about the now so much, right? You're worried about the now so much. You kind of forfeit the future of your program to get it all done right now. And what will that future be like down the road?
And that led me into the last question of Greg Powers on the spot. That's what we're calling this entire segment is, realistically, signing day, we're putting that in like big air quotes here, of signing day in February. Is there a certain person, a certain kid that you're looking at and saying, you absolutely need to keep an eye on where this guy is going, because he didn't opt up to do that early signing day period?
Well, we talked about Harold Perkins. We talked about Devin Campbell. Those were the top 2 guys. We just published a story at DCTF here in the last week of the top 7 uncommitted prospects in the state who are looking to make their decision, you know, before the early, well, not the early signing period, but national signing day. But as I look through that list, there's a guy that I think is a sleeper, and I want to talk about him a little bit, and that's Caleb Douglas, a wide receiver who was a one-time quarterback that kind of just transitioned into what I think is going to be he's going to be a star type of player. I think he's really good. I think he flew under the radar for a large portion of that, you know, developmental period. And now schools have really woken up to him. He's picked up a recent offer from Notre Dame and has a lot of top programs all after him a lot. And another wide receiver to join him is DJ Allen, a one-time TCU commit from Gladewater, who is just a freak show. Can play on either side of the football, I think, but, you know, he ranks very highly as a wide receiver. Those are 2 guys that I'm keeping a close eye on, but I have to also give a shout-out to our own Ishmael Johnson's favorite player in the state, and that's Anthony A.J. Holmes at Spring Westfield. If you're looking for a defensive tackle, this guy is going to be an absolute steal. I think he could be the next Ed Oliver type of guy in the Houston program if they're able to get him. I don't know where he's going to go. I have no insight about what he's going to do or who he's going to sign with, but for some reason, something just pulls me to Houston because he's at Spring Westfield, and Ed Oliver did play there, and he was the Houston Touchdown Club Defensive Player of the Year as well. There's a lot of connections there, and if Dana Holgerson can get him, that's going to be the defensive guy that you really have to keep an eye on that could change the way that you look at Houston's class.
I have seen him play in person. I saw him play against Spring in their heated rivalry there at Cy-Fair ISD Stadium, and I can tell you that, yes, he is a boss. But a guy that is always a boss for us, Greg Powers. Powers, thanks so much for joining us. I guess, honestly, this is weird because we've got a little Christmas tree action happening here, but we'll probably see you back in the studio next week, hopefully.
All right, we'll see you then.
Hey, thanks for watching this clip here on YouTube. If you like this kind of stuff and you want more of it, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And remember, you can watch us live every weekday at noon at TexasFootball.com, Facebook, Twitch, or here on YouTube. And if you want more of the best coverage of football in the state of Texas, check out TexasFootball.com and become a Dave Campbell's Texas Football Insider at TexasFootball.com/subscribe.